if we look at an organization and we try to break it down as far as what we would expect for the broadest organization-wide policy is an enterprise information security policy, really could be referred to as a general security policy or an IT security policy or an information security policy. This policy really sets the strategic direction, the scope, and the tone for all the security efforts within the organization. This is an executive level document, usually drafted by or with the input of the CIO, the Chief Information Officer of the organization, and it's usually, it's not generally too long, anywhere between 2 to 10 pages in length. When this policy has been developed, the Chief Information Security Officer usually begins forming the security teams and initiating this security system development lifecycle process, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Now, some of the elements that we can expect to see in an enterprise information security policy is, again, an overview of the organization's philosophy on security, basic structure of the information security organization and who is responsible to fulfill the information of the security function, fully articulated responsibilities for security, and then as well as the unique role that security would play within the organization. Junior to the enterprise information security policy, we would see sometimes referred to as the issue-specific security policy. And these particular policies really address specific types of technologies and processes to support routine operations of an organization. Certain guidelines are needed to instruct employees on how to use these technologies and processes properly. In general, the ISSP addresses specific areas of technology, things like internet use, email policies. They require very frequent updates as the technology changes or the usage model changes. It needs to be updated. It contains an issue statement on the organization's position on issues that relate to those particular technologies. And, there are a number of different approaches that we see when creating and managing issue-specific security policies within a particular organization. Three of the most common areas or common types of approaches when managing these are to create a number of independent information security documents, each tailored to a specific issue, create a single comprehensive document that attempts to cover all of the particular issues, and then creating modular ISSP documents that unify policy creation and administration while maintaining specific issues responsibilities. So there's no one right way of doing it. There's a variety of different ways, and organizations need to really choose which works best for those. A little breakdown on the components of what we would expect to see in an ISSP. Statement of the policy, authorized access, usage of equipment, prohibited uses of equipment. There's a bunch of different things that we would see in there. System management, violations, policy review, modifications, and limits of liability. So, a little bit more specific than an issue-specific security policy would be a system-specific policy or a system security policy, which really functions as a formalized written document distributed to users, agreed to in writing, usually codified in standards and procedures used when configuring or maintaining a system. Things like access control lists, which consist of the actual access control list, some sort of matrix, capability tables governing the rights and privileges of particular users to a particular system. If we got maybe a human resources or a payroll software, we would expect to see a system-specific policy associated with that. Configuration rules that comprise the specific configuration codes entered into the system to guide the execution of the particular system. Things like ACL policies, which allow configuration to restrict access to anyone or any particular location. Generally, they regulate who can use the system, what authorized user can access the system, when authorized users can access the system, and where they can access the system from. Rule policies are more specific to the operation of a system than an access control list, and they may or may not deal with users directly. Many security systems require specific configuration scripts that tell the system what actions to perform on each set of information that they process. Just an example of a firewall VPN policy editor that you would see from Checkpoint Security, Checkpoint Software Technology. Just really looking at source destination, the services that an individual might, depending on where they're coming from and where they're going to, might have access to. So if we look at policy management, you have to remember that policies are living documents that must be managed and really nurtured. They are constantly changing and growing, so we have to make sure that we are of the mindset that policies are not static. They are bound to change over time. It should change over time. And I mentioned it before that they have to be appropriately disseminated and managed. And the problem comes when we start updating policies. We have to make sure that all the old information is removed and that organization employees only have access to the most current version. You have to make special consideration for organizations that undergo mergers and takeovers and partnerships, because we have to make sure that everybody's on the same sheet of music. When two organizations are merged, we have to make sure that the policies are consistent across all new entities. Some organizations have moved towards automated policy management, which is basically a category of software for managing information security policies. And these really came about as a response to needs that have been pushed out from individuals within the security function that indicate that these are, it's needed to help manage the multiple policies that organizations might be facing. I mentioned earlier about the information security blueprint, and this is just one approach for selecting a methodology that adopt a published model or framework for information security. And there's a bunch of them out there, and I'll run through some of them in a little bit. And basically, a framework is the basic skeletal structure within which additional detailed planning is accomplished. And it can be placed in a manner that allows us to define it and develop it and refine it before we try to implement it. Experience teaches us that what works well for one organization may not precisely fit for another. So there's nothing wrong with looking at a particular set of best practices, but we have to make sure that we understand that it's probably not going to fit us 100%. We're going to have to manipulate it a little bit. So looking at some particular types of series or security framework, one of them that most of us should be familiar with is the ISO 27000 series. It's most widely referenced and often discussed security modules in information technology. It's basically a code of practice for information security management. And it was originally published as the British standard BS 7799. Organizational security policies needed to provide management direction and support for the information security program within any particular organization. And it has a